Hey, wasn't the worship incredible this morning? Like, it's so good. And Nate, you're in the room, man. Here's what I want to say to you. Nate is not my staff. Nate is my worship leader. And I'm proud of you, man. And so what you've done with the team, it's amazing. And we had some new folks up here. Gwen and Debbie were up here for the first time, and they look like they have won a Grammy before. They were amazing. So great to have you guys with us. I don't know if I said this at the beginning of the service with the baptisms, but if this is your first time here, my name is Joel, so hello. Welcome to the basement. We are so pumped that you're here if this is your first time hanging out with us. And that welcome home card that Cotter talked about at the beginning of the service, if you didn't get to turn that in with the giving, bring it to the back after the service. I'll be in the back of the foyer. I got some gifts for you, and I just want to meet you and say thanks for being here. I also want to say hey to everybody who's joining us online, and specifically want to shout out Tirza, Tirza used to be part of our church in the basement, but then she moved to Washington State. Hello. She moved there a few years ago, but she's still part of our online family. She emailed me this week, and she said, I heard about you guys going above ground, and she's like, why couldn't you do that when I was there? I don't know, but let's make some noise for Tirza on the West Coast and everybody else who's joining us online. Hey, I believe this is week 3 of this series we've been in called The Revelation of Jesus Christ. And has this been interesting, if not a little bit weird? If you guys enjoy this, is something helpful at all? Okay, it's good to know, because maybe you're like me. I've been having some weird dreams since we started this series. Some of those AI videos have been messing with me, and so hopefully it's been worth it for you guys. And if you've not been with us, maybe you're just catching up with us. Good news, we've not even gotten out of chapter 1 yet. And it has been wild so far. Okay, now speaking of wild, there's going to be some wild things that go on today between Commanders fans and Eagles fans. Where are the Commanders fans in the room? Where are the Commanders fans? Okay, a few of you. I'm not even going to ask for the Eagles fans. Listen, I don't have a team in the fight anymore. All I want today is for anybody but the Chiefs. That's all I'm rooting for. Sorry, Taylor Swift, but forget your team. But anyway, back to Revelation. It was written way back in 96 AD by one of Jesus' top 3 friends. And anybody remember what his name is? John, all right, John. And John was about 80 years old when he wrote this. He hadn't seen his friend Jesus for around 60 years. That's how long it's been since the ascension happened. And so John is 80-something. He's thrown on this island called Patmos because they were trying to kill him for following Jesus. And so one weekend on this island in Patmos, John magically gets teleported into God's heavenly throne room. Hello. And I've been kind of trying to explain what that looked like to you guys, but basically it looked like a Marvel movie. He was seeing special effects in real time. I'm pretty sure Iron Man flew by. I mean, it was just wild up there. And so that's been chapter 1. But today we're finally going to move on from Marvel effects and, God's heavenly throne room into chapters 2 and 3. We're made it to chapters 2 and 3, people. So this is a big deal. And this is a 4-week series, so I'll nail at least 10% of this book before we're done. But now we're going from God's heavenly throne room to Jesus writes these 7 letters to the church. Now, next weekend we'll be in chapter 4 and we go right back into this crazy town, okay? But for now, I'm calling today's message, and we'll put this on the screen, an open letter to the church. And so turn to your neighbor or a couple people around you and tell them, you got mail. You got mail. You got mail. Some of you don't know where that came from because you're young. Hey, opening question. Do we have any picky eaters in the room? Come on, somebody else has to get anxiety around the dinner table like me. Come on, picky eaters, raise them up. Okay, thank you. Thank you. There's 3 of us. I feel seen. I too gag at the sight of meatloaf. Most of you obviously are not. How many of you you're not a picky eater? You're like a vacuum cleaner. You just eat anything's in front of you. Okay, yes, the cholesterol medicine industry would like to thank you for your service. Now, if you're not a picky eater, there's only 3 of us, so the rest of them won't get this. But have you ever thought you're not going to like something, and then you force yourself to try it, and then you're like, this is amazing? Does that happen to us 3? Yeah, and so I remember when I was a kid growing up, and I hate to say this because my mom watches us every single week, and Mom, maybe just turn the TV off for 3 minutes. And I love you if you watch this. But my mom used to make us steak when we were kids, every once in a while growing up. And I don't know how else to say this, but she did not make it well done. She cremated steaks. I have shoes that are more tender than the steaks we used to have as kids growing up. And she used to put the oven to broil, put cheap Food Lion thin steaks on this cookie sheet, and she'd throw them in there until they turned to beef jerky. The fire alarm would be going off, and then she'd take those things out, put them on a plate, and be like, kids, we got steak tonight. And I was like, ugh. And I'm not kidding. As a kid, I did not think anyone liked steak. I had no idea like steak was a thing. And so when I became like 16, I was one night one of my friends was like, "Hey, our friend group, we're going to go to like Outback Steakhouse right over here." And I was like, well, "Who made that terrible choice?" And again, I'm not lying. I did not know people like steak. I didn't even know why there was a steak house. I'm like, that's like a junk house. Like, why would you go there? And so we're going in, and I say to my friend Jesse, I'm like, Jesse, like, who chose this? Like, why are we here? And Jesse's like, oh, you've only had mom steak. No offense to the moms in the room. Jesse said it, not me. But he's like, let me order for you. And so he ordered me an Outback Special, which is, I think is a sirloin, and he said, cook it medium rare. And I never had that before. So I cut into my first non-cremated steak right over here at 16 years old, and I tasted it, and I too was whisked away into God's heavenly throne room with John. I mean, it was amazing. I'm like, where has this been my whole life? Sorry, Mom, I apologize, but my goodness. And so I learned then that as a picky eater, I just want to have a new way when it comes to food. Like, I just want to try things, because sometimes you try things and they're better than you think. And so, but it's still hard as a picky eater. And so a couple weeks ago, Stacy's Aunt Jane, for our Christmas present to our family, she said she was going to take us to the Culture of Pearl over here. And so shout out to Aunt Jane, I love you, you're amazing. The problem was when we got there, she insisted on ordering some of our food for us. Now, if you're a picky eater, this is a problem. And this is not a lie. Here's a couple of things she ordered. She ordered raw octopus tentacles. The suction cup was still on these things. I about died at the table. And then she ordered kama cheek. And I was like, Aunt Jane, what's kama cheek? No lie, she said, it's fish cheeks. She said, it's a delicacy. I said, it's disgusting, I'll tell you that. They should be endangered, these fish cheeks. Like, I don't even know. And this is not a lie, all right? So I have this rule. I didn't want to eat any of this stuff, but I have a rule. If you're buying, I'm trying. And Aunt Jane used to work way up in the FBI, and so I'm scared of Aunt Jane. So I tried fish cheeks and I tried octopus tentacles. And they were amazing. I am not lying, all right? Way better than mom's steak. I'm just going to put it out there. And so at 42 years old, I'm still learning. Like, I just got this new way of trying food is you just got to try it. And so the next time you get offered fish cheeks, eat the fish cheeks. Come on, eat the fish cheeks. But everybody say a new way. Okay, here's why I told you that. In Revelation, it was written by John Boy sometime around 96 AD. All right, and so it had been, I already told you, it had been 60 years since John had seen his friend Jesus when Jesus like ascended into heaven. And 10 days after that 60-year time he saw Jesus, 10 days after that, the church launched. And so when John writes Revelation, the church is still super young. The church just celebrated the big 6-0. And how many of you're in your 60s? You're in your 60s. Don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Listen, you're young. I don't care how much Metamucil you have this morning. You are young. I don't care how many Velcro straps are on your shoes. You are young. And so we'll put this on the screen. The new church was Jesus' new way for the world to experience the new good news of Jesus. Everybody say, a new way. Okay, just like that kama cheek, a new way to try food. This is a new way to spread the good news. And so in Revelation chapters 2 and 3, Jesus writes 7 letters to these 7 churches that you can find where these 7 churches would have been in modern day Turkey today. And so I just want to show you a quick overview of chapters 2 and 3 just visually. And so let's just put this on the screen. And I want to ask you what you notice about these 2 chapters. We're going to switch to the next one. What'd you say? Red letters. The white letters are actually not actually in the Bible. Those are just headers in the Bible. This is all Jesus talking. The whole thing is Jesus talking. And so this is an open letter to the church from the CEO and founder of the church, which is who? Jesus. Jesus is always the right answer in church. And so you got to picture this. These 7 churches are real churches. They're filled with real people, just like us. These people have jobs, they have houses, they got families like Aunt Jane who makes them eat kamachick. These are real churches, just like our church today, all right? We're just like 1,900 years older than them, and we're in a basement. But don't miss this. This whole idea of following Jesus is only a 60-year-old idea to these churches. And so this is still a new way to experience the good news of Jesus. And this is a little kind of interesting thing. Jesus, before we were Christians, and you may not be a Christian, but a lot of you in this room are, before we were called Christians, you know what we were called? The Way. The Jesus Way, right, which has a nice ring to it. And so turn to the person next to you and say, hey, hey, we're the way. Hey, hey, we're the way. And so these 7 new churches, I just want you to follow me. These 7 new churches are filled with real people, and they are trying to follow this new Jesus way. And they're getting some things right, and they're getting some things wrong. Hello. Not much has changed in, let's say, the last 1,900 years, right? And so, even though, the church is not perfect, and we'll put this on the screen, even though the church still isn't perfect, the local church is still Jesus' perfect plan to share the good news to the world. Now, this kind of makes me think of something. How many of you in the room are old enough to remember video stores? Now, I know you got arthritis in your arm if you're old enough to remember this, but just try to remember, raise your hand. You remember video stores? Yeah. Okay. Some of you still have did anybody still have a Blockbuster card? Jerry? You need to put that on eBay, man, like that. Now, if you're under 20 in the room, like you don't understand this. Like, what is a video store? Let me explain what we used to have to go through back in the day. First, we used to have to get in our car and drive to an actual video store. And if we wanted to rent a certain movie, we had to make sure nobody else had rented it, and so that the tag was there. And so if it was there, you would grab the tag, you would go up and rent it for $2.50 or something. You'd have to get back in your car with your rented movie. You take it home, you put it in your VCR. Okay, Google that. Okay, VCR. And it was never rewound, so you'd have to rewind the thing. And then you'd watch the movie, and then you were kind, and you would rewind. And then you would take the movie back to the video store, all within a 24-hour period. Isn't this how it worked? And if you're young, this is why us old people are grumpy. This is how Karens became Karens. You know what I'm saying? Not this Karen. But that's how it worked. And then there was this little startup company that had this new plan to share movies everywhere really easily. I don't know if you've heard of it. It was this startup called Netflix. Now, all the 20 and under, you're like, oh yeah, I got that app. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about DVD Netflix, in the mail Netflix. Can I get a witness for United States Postal Service Netflix if you remember it? Yeah. And so how it would work for me is I was on the 3 DVD plan, bougie, okay? And I would be sending Back to the Future 1 DVD in the mail, while Back to the Future 2, the DVD was in my DVD player, and I had queued up Back to the Future 3 to be the next thing to come in the mail. The problem was there was a scratch on the bottom of Back to the Future 2 DVD, which threw your whole algorithm off, right? Is anybody having a nostalgic moment right now? But even though Netflix wasn't perfect, it was still a great plan to share movies with the world. Am I right? And that's a lot like the church. Like the church and even our church, we got some scratches on the DVD. Hello. But make no mistake about it, we are still God's perfect plan to share the good news of Jesus with the world. Now, in Revelation 2 and 3, Jesus writes these 7 letters to 7 churches. Now, why just 7 letters? Because in 96 AD, there were probably over 40 churches that were around at that point. So why 7? Well, I don't know. But I have a theory. Revelation was written in apocalyptic writing style. We talked about that last week, which basically means a lot of things in Revelation is symbolic and it's symbolic. And so the word 7, or the number 7 in Revelation, it stands for perfection and completion. Perfection and completion. And so I wonder if Jesus wrote 7 letters as opposed to 40 letters, because Jesus is saying the church isn't perfect now. Oh, but it's going to be one day. And I am going to, over time, make my church, I'm going to perfect my church, and I'm going to complete what I started. That's just my theory. I don't know. But today I want to show you 2 of the 7 letters. Now, full disclosure, one of the letters is written to a church literally named Philadelphia, even though it's not like this Philly, it's not like Will Smith Philly, it's not Eagles Philly. But I am not going to read that letter because I can't handle you Eagles fans today. I think the letter says, be nice, Eagles fans, to other fan bases, all right? But just like, I'm not going to read that one. That's not it. But I want to read the first and the last letter, all right? And so we'll start out with the first one. This is just part of the first letter, but we'll get through the whole thing. This is chapter 2, starting in verse 1. Jesus says, write this letter to the angel of the church in Ephesus. And so this letter is written to what church? The church in Ephesus. This is the message from, and this is the nickname Jesus gives himself, from the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and the one who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. Now, random thing, in every letter, all 7 of these letters, Jesus describes himself differently, because you can't contain Jesus to one description. And so there's 7 different descriptions. And then he says, I know. Everybody say, I know. I know all the things you do. I've seen your hard work and your patient endurance. I know you don't tolerate evil people. You have examined the claims of those who say they are apostles but are not. You have discovered they are liars. You have patiently suffered for me without quitting. Now, let me break this down this way. My wife, she tells me that I am OCD. And I don't like that, because OCD is not in alphabetical order. Okay, those letters should be rearranged, all right? But I'm just like kind of OCD, so I see patterns. If you're like an OCD person, you maybe see some patterns. And so when I read through these 7 letters this week, here's the pattern that I see in 6 of 7 of them, okay? 6 out of 7 of them start out with, hey, you all are crushing it at this. Then phase 2, you all need to knock that mess off. Phase 3, if you knock that mess off, we're going to party in heaven like it's 1999. And so that's the pattern that OCD me sees. And so we just read part 1, all right? And so part 1 is like you all are crushing it. And so Jesus is like, hey, Ephesus, hey, church, you all are crushing it. You're working hard. You're not putting up with sin. You're like not giving up when life gets hard, crushing it. But what I really pick up on in this is those 2 words I had you say, I know. Jesus says, I know. Everybody say, I know. Now, my wife and I, we have recently entered a new phase of parenting. And if you have really young kids, what I'm about to tell you may make you throw up in your mouth a little bit. We do not have doggy bags in the back of the seats. We probably should. But after 11 years of not being able to leave my house without taking my children with me, or getting a babysitter to watch my kids, okay? After basically 11 years of house arrest, people, Stacy and I can finally go on a date to a nearby restaurant and leave the kids home alone. Come on, somebody. It's glorious. And listen, after 11 years, we got a lot of dating to make up for and a lot of making out to make up for. And again, if you got little kids, sorry if you're throwing up in your mouth a little bit, but here's how we're able to do it. We have a camera inside our house. And so basically what happens is Stacey and I, we go to a local restaurant and we just sit there and watch our kids on camera. And they don't know we're watching them, which, by the way, aren't you glad there was not a camera in your house when you were growing up? Holy moly. We'd all be in prison, all right? And so when we go out on dates, we just watch our kids. And so this is what happened the other day. It was a few months ago rather, but we were at a restaurant and we're watching our kids. We're driving home and we're watching our kids, and they get in this big old fight. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the whole thing. And I don't remember what they were arguing about, but they were doing some sinning. All right, they were at it. All right. And so I told Stacey, I was like, I wonder how they'll act when we come in, because they don't know we're watching them. So I walk in, and the kids are just relaxing on the couch. Now they're breathing a little heavy because they were arguing, but they were like, and I was like, hey guys, how was your time while we were away? Did you guys like get along? They're like, oh yeah, Dad, we were great. We didn't fight or anything. I'm like, you are liars. I know everything you've been doing. And I was like, you were fighting about this and that. And they're like, how did he know? And I'm like, because I'm your father. I know everything. And so I tell you that because I think that's how a lot of us think Jesus is. We think he's like surveilling us just to catch us doing bad things. You know, we think he sees us while we're sleeping. He knows when we're awake. He knows when we've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sakes. And that's kind of how we think about Jesus. But when Jesus says, I know, he's saying it in the encouraging part of the letter. And so I don't know who needs to hear this, but maybe you're in a place right now where you feel like nobody sees you. Maybe you feel like you're a single parent and you feel like no one knows how hard it is to do what you're doing. Maybe you're fighting an addiction and nobody knows how hard you're working at that. Maybe you're working hard at work and it doesn't seem like your boss cares. And I just want you to hear Jesus saying today, I know. I see you. And nobody else might see you, but like I know you are, as a single parent, like I know you're waking up early just supporting those kids. You're going to bed late just supporting those kids. I know what you're doing at work. I know you're struggling maybe with mental health and you feel like no one else knows. I know. And I just want you to picture in a good way, Jesus saying to you, I know. And so that's how this letter starts. And then we get into the y'all got to knock this off part. So you ready? If you're ready, say, I'm ready. Okay, so check this out, verses 4-5. But Jesus says, I have this complaint against you. You don't love me or each other as you did at first. Look how far you've fallen. Turn back to me and do the works you did at first. If you don't repent, I will come and remove your lampstand from its place among the churches. In other words, I will close your church doors. Now, I've been trying to share this idea, this whole series to you, that Jesus, yes, he's loving. Yes, he's kind. Yes, he's full of grace. But Jesus is also holy, holy, holy. Everybody say, holy, holy, holy. That's Jesus. And so he's saying, I can't put up with your not holiness. And so he says to them, hey, and maybe he's saying this to some of us, you don't love me like you did at first. Like, remember how excited you were when you got baptized, like what that day was like for you? Remember like when you used to come to church early and you would sit on the front row? High five, front rowers. I love that you guys sit up here with me. My side's a bit empty, but you guys sat over here, so that's cool. But remember when you used to sit on the front row and during worship, like you would sing loud, you didn't care who heard you, and maybe every once in a while you would lift your hand, maybe you're all in, you did the Shawshank. You know, but now you're kind of like the, you know, the I stole a TV, like, you're not sure about it. Remember when you used to wake up early, read your Bible? Remember when you used to like tell people about me, you used to bring people to church, and Jesus is like, where's that passion? Like, I miss that. And the longer you've been a Jesus follower, the more that kind of hits home, right? Me and I've been dating my smoking hot wife since 2003. And even though we're married, you can still date. Come on, somebody. And so actually we have one of our earliest pictures we got together around 2003. I think we're 8 years old here, maybe 9, I don't know. But when Stacey and I started dating, I remember one of our very first dates was to the Georgia House restaurant. Who remembers the Georgia House back in the day? Who just can taste that Kentucky salad right now? Rest in peace, Georgia House. But we took one of our first dates to the Georgia House restaurant, and for that date, I opened Stacey's door. And like, this is true. For the last few decades, like I've been opening Stacey's door for her. And so men in the room, chivalry is not dead. If we can watch football for 8 hours today, we can put down a toilet seat and we can open up a door. Can I get an amen, ladies in the room? And so I've been big on opening the door for my wife until recently. And I didn't even realize that I stopped opening her door for her. And so this is what happened. About a month ago, we're on a date, which means we're at a local restaurant watching our kids on surveillance. And on the way home, Stacy wanted to go. She's like, can we go to the grocery store and get some Snickers ice cream bars? Which, by the way, that is her love language. I can be in the doghouse, but if I go to the grocery store and get some Snickers ice cream bars, we're back in Song of Solomon, okay? We are good. Things are good. And so, anyway, we went into the grocery store, we got ice cream bars, and we got back in the car. And Stacy looked at me in the car and she said, you know, you've been forgetting something recently. And I was like, well, what? She said, you don't open my car door for me anymore. I said, you want a Snickers ice cream bar? But I didn't even realize that I had stopped. Now, I am back on, okay? Chivalry Joel is back and better and bolder than ever, okay? And I literally want to be opening her car door for her when we're in our 90s. Like, I want to do that. That is like a big thing for me. And here's the thing. The same thing, like how we can kind of fade away in our relationships, things get kind of normal, that can happen in our relationship with Jesus. Like at first we're like, I'm all in, this is amazing, praise hands emoji, everything. But then over time we can start to lose it. And what the CEO of the church says is, I want you to love me like that again. I just want you to come back to me. Because I don't want Jesus taking away my lampstand. And you might be like, well, what's a lampstand? It's God's blessing on our life. I don't want him taking away that in my life. Do you want him taking away that in your life? The good news is, though, Jesus doesn't say be perfect. He just says, come back to me. Love me like you did at first. Now, this is a letter to the church of Ephesus. And you want to hear the most interesting thing I've learned this week? If you're like a Bible nerd, you're going to geek out on this. If you are not a Bible nerd, you are probably going to be doing your Walmart grocery pickup order during this, okay? But I think this is amazingly interesting. Do you know who started the church of Ephesus? The guy who wrote more of the New Testament than anybody else. So who are we talking about? Anybody know? Paul, sort of a big deal in the Bible. He may have wrote a book called Ephesians to Ephesus. And so maybe you're like, okay, so Paul was the pastor there. Is that who was the pastor? Was Paul the pastor when Jesus wrote this letter? Well, no, because Paul wouldn't deny Jesus, so they killed him. But after Paul had a protege named Timothy. Everybody say Timothy. Timothy is sort of a big deal in the Bible too. There's 1st and 2nd Timothy in the Bible. And so he became the pastor of the church of Ephesus. And maybe you're like, okay, so he was the pastor when John wrote this in Revelation. Well, no, they killed him too for following Jesus. It's kind of hard to be a Jesus follower back in the 1st century. But then after Paul and Timothy, do you know who the next pastor was? John. The guy who's writing Revelation. John. Now, side note about John, something that's really interesting. John was the guy when Jesus was on the cross that Jesus said, hey, I want you to watch after my mom. And so he was not only the pastor, he was Jesus' mom's caretaker, like the Mary. And so it is safe to assume that Jesus' mom probably went to the church of Ephesus a bunch of times. Is this, I don't know, I think it's really interesting. But could you imagine being in church and you're like, psst. You know who he's talking about? She knows him. That's Jesus' mom. She used to pack him like hummus lunches for elementary school. That's his mom. And she used to make him mom steaks. Which is why when he fed 5,000 people, he used fish, not steaks. Her fault. She would have been in that church. Paul, Timothy, John, Jesus' mom. What I'm trying to tell you is the pedigree of this church is amazing. And if they could lose their passion for Jesus, it can happen anywhere. And I just want to tell you, just pause in this message and say, I never want us to lose our passion for Jesus here. I never want us to golf clap during a baptism here. I never want us to just get through the music here. I never want us to just be like, oh, I'm just checking the box. I want us to be passionate about Jesus here. And if I ever lose my passion for Jesus, I want to get a memo, people. I want to know. And so I just want us to be a church that's always passionate about Jesus. Am I the only one? Would you like to be in on this where we're passionate for Jesus in his house? That's what I want. And if you lost that, Jesus says, I know, but just come back to me. And then Jesus saves the best for last. He says this, and this is the last part to this church in verse 7. He says, to everyone who is victorious, I will give fruit from the tree of life in the paradise of God. And I gotta get you moving in here. I want you to high five somebody and say, we're gonna party in heaven like it's 1999. Come on, that's what this is saying. So Jesus ends this letter on a good note. Okay, now I gotta be real quick because there's probably gonna be a wait at line over here at the Cracker Barrel if I don't move through this. So I wanna show you, I wanna skip to the last letter. Now, you remember the pattern? The pattern is, y'all are crushing it. Y'all need to knock this off. If you do knock that off, we're going to party in heaven like it's 1999. Remember the pattern? Okay, this is the only letter where the pattern doesn't apply. Because we don't get you're crushing it with this one. Jesus, he is not warm and fuzzy. And so turn to your neighbor and say, buckle up, buckle up. Okay, here we go. This is the letter in chapter 3, starting in verse 14. Write this letter to the angel of the church of Laodicea. Everybody say Laodicea. Laodicea. This is the message from, and remember, Jesus gives himself different nicknames in each one of these letters, from the one who is the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's new creation. He says, I know, all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other, but since you are lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. You say, I am rich. I have everything I want. I don't need a thing. And you don't realize that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. That's like, anybody feel uncomfortable? I feel uncomfortable. But could you imagine you're this church? You're the church that made Jesus want to throw up in his mouth. I remember when I was a kid, I read this passage and I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the one making Jesus throw up in his mouth. Now, here's what I didn't know when I was growing up. I didn't know that this word picture that Jesus just painted was super specific to this church in Laodicea. Now, a little bit of first century information. If your city had hot springs or cold springs, your city was a big deal. Because hot springs would serve as like medicinal healing kind of thing. If you had cold springs, it was really hot in this region of the world. So at certain points, like you were getting that cold spring. And so having a hot or cold spring was a big deal. Laodicea didn't have either one. But on each side of them, there was a city, one with hot springs, and on the other side, a city with cold springs. And they're like, we got an idea. We are going to pipe in the hot water and pipe in the cold water, and we are going to have the best of both worlds, even though we don't have any of these springs. And so they created all these aqueducts, and this water ran from the cities on each side. The thing is, once the hot and cold water got to them, it was lukewarm, useless, and dirty. And Jesus is like, Laodicea, I don't want your spirituality to be lukewarm. I want you to be on fire for me, because do you know who I am? I saved you on a cross, and now I am in God's heavenly throne room, and I got fire for eyes. And so I don't want lukewarm followers. I want people to be all in. And if not, like after I've done all this for you, it just kind of makes me sick to my stomach. And so some of you hear this and you're like, man, I need a Xanax. That is, ugh. And here's the thing. Maybe that's why Jesus painted such a heavy word picture, to get our attention. I mean, I'm uncomfortable, but let me also say this. The good news is that's not how this letter ends. Because here's what Jesus says next. He says, I correct and discipline. Let's read this together. Everyone I love. And so be diligent and turn from your indifference. In other words, Jesus is like, hey, listen, I'm not mad at you. I love you. I am perfecting you. And I think the message Jesus is trying to say to all of us this morning is, I want you to be all in for me. And good news is, I'm not saying we need to be perfect for him, but he wants us to be all in for him. And so Jesus ends all 7 of these letters with one of the most famous illustrations Jesus has ever said. And he says this. He says, look, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come in. And we will share a meal together as friends. Last weekend I told you it'd probably be at Mission Barbecue, but I don't know where it'll be, but it'll be somewhere. We're going to share a meal together as friends. And those who are victorious will sit with me. Just picture this. You will sit with me on my throne, just as I was victorious and sat with my Father on his throne. Now I just want you to picture this. I want you to picture Jesus just knocking on the door to your soul right now. He's just knocking. And he knows you hear him because he's Jesus. And he's like, is your heart racing right now? Because that's me. I'm knocking on the door to your soul. And I'm wondering, will you let me in? Will you let me in? Now, real quick, I'm ending, but I have 2 dogs. I have Eli and Charlie. Eli is 16 years old. He's elderly. Charlie's 1. Eli is perfect, and Charlie is stupid. I don't have any other way to put it, okay? Like, he is certainly not opened the door when Jesus knocked on his heart, okay? He is a mess of a dog. But in our house, if somebody comes to our door and knocks on it, okay, like Mr. Bob, who's our neighbor. He's sweet. He's 92 years old, okay, and he can whoop me in pickleball. And I don't want to talk about it, all right, because he's way better than he should be at 92 years old. But if Mr. Bob comes to our door and does that, my dog, sweet Charlie, who's sitting with me, he will turn into a serial killer. And he'll go, and I'm like, Charlie, stop. You know, like Mr. Bob, he has got a backhand. Like, you do not want to mess with Mr. Bob, Charlie. But Charlie just, because he's stupid. But I love him. But here's the thing. When someone knocks on our door, you can't ignore it in my house. It's like an alarm has gone off because Charlie is the alarm. And like, you got to get to the door. And I just tell you that because I don't want you to miss Jesus knocking on the door to your soul in his house. And I want it to be like an alarm is going off in your soul. And he's like, I'm knocking. And I know you can hear me. I know you're in there. All you got to do is open that door. And maybe you're like unsure, so you like look through the peephole and you don't think he knows you're looking, but this is Jesus. He knows. And so he's knocking and he waves to you as you're looking through the peephole. And through the peephole, you see a nail hole. Because he still has those holes in his hands. And he's like, listen, I did this for you. And I stand at the door, your door, and knock. And I just want you to let me in. And if you are a Jesus follower, aren't you thankful that he knocked on your door and you opened the door? Aren't you thankful that you opened that door? And if you're not a Jesus follower, we're not here to judge you. But I just don't know how you can't open that door. And so I just want to ask you, will you open that door today? If you guys would just bow your heads. If you've never opened the door to let Jesus into your life, he's knocking right now. If your heart is racing, that is him trying to get your attention, because all he wants is to share a meal with you in heaven one day. And so if that's you and you want to accept Jesus, you want to open that door, would you just raise your hand in this moment if you just want to make that decision? I see the hands in this room. Here's what we're going to do if you're a Jesus follower, or you just raise your hand. Let's just say this out loud together. Dear Jesus, I heard you knocking this morning, and I'm opening my door for you. I believe you're the Son of God, and I believe I'm a sinner. But today, I repent of my sins, and I accept your forgiveness. Thank you for knocking on the door. And one day, I'll walk through your door into heaven. In Jesus' name. And everybody said amen. Amen. And can we just celebrate those who made that decision today? It's amazing.